Hi everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Nice to see so many people have been able to join us, and I'm sure more people will be jumping on as we go through today. So today's webinar is a little bit different to what we've been doing previously. You may have joined some of our distance learning webinars where we've looked into kind of specific tools on how to use them around distance learning, but today we're going to be looking at how we might prepare for an environment where, say, we have half of our class at home and half of our class at school. And I think it's really fair to say that this is unprecedented times for everyone, not just with the general world and the world of COVID, but particularly for educators out there who are doing such a great job at continuing to support learners even though they've been at home. And I think whilst we have maybe got to grips with teaching students at home, we are really entering into sort of uncharted territory. So we're hoping today that we will be able to provide you with some practical guidance on how to use G Suite to support learners in this particular way. Obviously, there's so many of you that have joined us. We would love to get your thoughts and how you're planning to do that in the chat. So please make sure that you add your comments to the chat and share your experiences, because I think actually more than anything, having the community's involvement and ideas around that will be super helpful as we move forward. Today we have Ailey, who's going to be joining us a little later. She's going to be doing some hands-on demo with Google Classroom specifically, because we think that this is probably the best tool in order to kind of continue this learning, even though some of your students may still be at home. And we'll look at the kind of full process of how you might set up a Google Classroom to support that. So again, please share your ideas if you've got any particular ways in which you're doing that. And then we have Ian Vosser from South Lanarkshire Council, who is here. And he's going to be sharing how his particular school are preparing for this environment. And so again, hopefully you'll pick up some ideas along the way. So I'm going to get started, and I'm just going to share with you a little bit of an overview about how Google is supporting schools across the world, and just to put it into context of the fact that Scotland isn't obviously the only country being affected by this, but we are seeing some great use cases across the world of using these tools, not just for now, but also for distance learning generally. And I'll just kind of point out this great quote, and kind of just, it really goes along the lines of what I was saying. But this is an absolute disruption of education. I think we can all agree, and teachers are really doing a great job at trying to manage this, and just kudos to you all, and thanks all for joining today. So when we look at kind of how learning is being experienced right now by students, it's very much on the go. Teachers are obviously looking at how they can deliver the courses in brand new ways. School leaders are looking at how they can communicate with parents and guardians. And I guess for those of you maybe a little bit easier because you are teachers, but trying to support students at home when you maybe don't know what systems they're using, or you've never used online learning tools before like Google Classroom. It's really hard, right, to get your head around these brand new systems, and parents have have challenges around this, and also teachers on how they support parents through this as well. And then students being motivated to continue learning at home is also been one of the key challenges. But it seems to have worked fairly well, and obviously that varies depending on what school you're in and how well supported you are with digital learning. But everyone has been experiencing this, and this is global, not just in Scotland. So what we know is that schools around the world are really rising to this challenge. And I just wanted to show you some examples of schools in different places, and places where you might not think digital learning is very, very popular. But if we go to Mumbai in India, I really love this kind of story about how they're using Meet to basically deliver lessons still at home. And I just, you kind of really don't associate, a country like India, for example, with delivering online content. But it's absolutely awesome to see that they're using G Suite and using some of the features to continue that learning at home for students. Another country, Mexico. So I love the fact that they've done kind of a YouTube training series, right, for 1.2 million teachers. And I know that part of some of the Google team were involved in some of this. And that's, we have about 430 people watching right now. So imagine doing this from 1.2 million teachers. That's pretty impressive. But the fact that they are able to continue this distance learning and they're using G Suite tools to do this is pretty impressive as well. kind of bringing a little bit closer to home, in Manchester, this is from Oldham Hume Grammar School, and they are basically kind of doing things as normal, but just online. So they've taken the approach that we'll kind of maintain our timetable. We'll still have our face-to-face lessons with our students, but the fact that they were already using G Suite and they were already using digital learning meant that was a much easier transition for them to do, and students were already familiar with the tools that they were using. And finally, actually a lot closer to me because I'm based in the Midlands, but this is from Windsor Academy Trust, who again are using Classroom and using G Suite regularly, and actually Chromebooks as well. But they've actually been putting PE resources online with things like yoga classes for students. And I think we'll touch a little bit on how we can check in with student health and wellbeing later. But please share some of your stories if you have some great examples of the kind of resources. Maybe you've been doing yoga lessons with your students as well. But it'd be great to hear how you've been utilising some of these tools and putting resources on for your students. So just to kind of see that, there's this great sort of unity from the educating community across the world in using digital tools. And as we know, it's not just G Suite. There are many other tools that teachers are using right now. But obviously today we are going to be focused on Google Classroom and G Suite. So at Google, what has been our goal during this time? And to be honest, it's all about being helpful. We've tried to make sure that, our systems are managing this kind of increase of amount of people using the tools. And what we really see, and kind of part of today's webinar, is about how do we support you guys in facilitating, this hybrid approach of learning, but also for best practices for distance learning. And we've got lots and lots of resources that we've put out there that have hopefully been a huge help to you. And hopefully today is too. So a couple of things that you may or may not know. We've worked really hard over the past few months to enhance our features on Google Meet. We've also done integration with a Classroom and Google Meet to hopefully make it a little bit easier, and so that your teaching and learning can happen in one place rather than having to have different tabs open and different tools open. And we've also been improving our teacher controls, so particularly within Google Meet itself, making sure that teachers actually have better controls. And you will see on our product roadmap for Google Meet that more of these will be rolled out over the summer, ready for back to school time. In addition to that, we've had lots of resources in order to help you at this time. So if you want to get up to date with some of the new features that are coming out and also your best practices, you can head over to our blog. You can either find it by just going to the Google for Education website. I don't think many people venture over to that. So I definitely recommend that you do that. But if not, you can head straight to the blog, which is g.co/edu. /COVID-19 is the specific stuff around what we've done in kind of relation to everything that's happening in the world right now. And for those of you that are already level 1 or level 2 educators, some of you may be certified trainers or even innovators, you can actually head over to g.co/teacher center. We've actually just revamped our teacher center. So you'll find on there some product guides, which are specific around, how do you edit or add tables into Google Docs, is kind of as simple as that, right up to your advanced educator certifications, for example. And actually, we've seen such a huge increase in the amount of our certifications being taken by teachers in the UK, because I really think that folks are using this time to develop themselves and also to get that nice badge they can pop at the bottom of their email address. Their emails, sorry. Not email address. And the other thing linked to today's webinar, and if you've registered for today, you would have gone to this website anyway. But if you head over to bit.ly/GFE UK webinars, you'll find all of our past webinars available to go back and watch, and also any upcoming ones that we'll be planning. Next week, we have something called EDU on Air, and we'll be taking a lot of a kind of a longer day out. It's a virtual event for folks to join, so feel free to register for that. And jump in as you can. I appreciate that lots of teachers are back in class right now, so it might not be as easy to take a full day out, but if you can catch up, it should be really valuable, and we'll hear from different schools across the UK and how they're preparing for this new model of learning. And so what does this mean, and what do we actually provide? I think that's a really good question. Something we always get asked. A lot of people focus heavy down onto Google Classroom, but there's lots of other tools that you have access to that could be of help at this time. And the reason that G Suite is such a popular set of tools for people is because the feedback we always get from teachers is that it's easy to use, it's really intuitive. You can have 10 students using it one day and up that to 1,000 students the next day. It's really scalable. And it's also built for collaboration. And because we're working in the cloud, you're able to collaborate live in real time, which you can start to think about how that might benefit you in the current situation that we see ourselves in. And everything is secure by design. The way that we build our tools are built for security. So with that, I'm going to pass over to Ailey, and we're going to get into the crux of getting hands-on with G Suite and how we might use that for this new environment. Hi, Ailey. Did you want to introduce yourselves, and then I'll...
Yes, of course. So I'm Ailey Mackay. I am a digital learning development officer in Midlothian Council, Google trainer, innovator, and I'm here to share just some of the tips and tricks for using Google Classroom. And I'm aware that some of you will be joining and you'll be accessing Google Classroom in Glow. Others will be using it within your own tenancy. So I'm just going to go straight from the Google home screen here and talk you through setting up Google Classroom and also how you can best use this for both synchronous and asynchronous learning. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to access Google Classroom. So I've got a new tab open in Google Chrome, and we have these 9 tiles at the top right-hand corner. This is our launch pad for all of the Google for Education tools, and is a fantastic place to start for when you want to access any of the tools. This can be customized as well. I always like to share this just for the fact that we can move these about so that our most regularly used tools are at the top, and then we can move the ones that we don't really use down to the bottom. So I'm just going to open Google Classroom from here. Once this opens, what you'll see is that I've got a few classrooms already set up. The demo class I'll share later. I also have classes set up for some reading groups, and I have a class set up for an entire classroom as well. You can use the classroom however you wish. You may want to have a different class for each group that you have if you're a primary teacher. This can be a bit easier to manage some of the literacy or numeracy tasks that you may set, but you can also have an entire class for one whole group. I'm going to show you how to set up a class for your entire class here, and this could be used for both secondary as well. So I'm going to click on this add sign at the top right hand corner and select create class. I'm just going to do a test class. You would give this a specific name. Certainly for those of you who are secondary teachers, make sure that you label it with your subject and maybe the class code as well, for the fact that these students, if they're in S1, they're going to have multiple S1 classes. So I'm just going to select create. The only field that is required is that top one there. It does tend to take a few seconds to create the class. So whilst it does that, I'll just talk through some of the other things here. Making sure that you are making all of your class names clear for students, and also when it loads the stream, we need to start to declutter that first of all, so that when students access this, it's not going to be full of all of the posts that you are putting on there. So before I do anything with my class, I always go to the settings cog at the top right here. In this area, in the general settings, this is where we can change our class code. So if you find that students are sharing it and students from other classes are maybe joining, you can reset the class code at any point or disable it once your entire class are enrolled. We can change the stream settings. So I always have this on before any students join. So you know your students best, and you may wish to have it so that students can only comment. And this is a really nice way to organize your class stream, because it saves students creating new posts on the stream and saves you having an absolute enormous stream to manage and read through. So if you have it so that they can only comment, they can then only comment on what you have posted there. You can also have it that they cannot comment or post at all, and only teachers can do that. I tend to prefer the students can only comment option, just because it keeps it a bit more organized, and it means I have control of what the posts are. The other thing I always do is I remove the classwork from the stream. So I hide notifications, and that simply prevents any of the Miss Mackay has posted this to the classwork, or Miss Mackay has posted this assignment. Students don't need to see that. They can go into classwork and see what is new. There is also the Meet link here. So for those of you who will be using Google Meet, and you can generate a class Meet link. So if I generate this here, as a teacher, you need to open this first of all. So this is great for live learning. So this is video calls with students. I know some authorities are using it, some are not. But this is a link that you can control. So long as you've opened it first, the students will only be able to join the Meet once you are in the room. They won't be able to go in there without your presence. So I'm going to hit save there, and what we'll see is we'll have the Meet link at the top now. So we have a Meet link along here. I can click on that to open it, just to make sure that that is all set up for my students. I'll allow all of this, and you'll see me there. So that is now ready to be used if I join now. And now I also have the class code. Now this is probably best for when you have your students in front of you, or it may be that you send out a information leaflet to parents and you have all the class codes that the students will require. Probably easier in a primary school setting to do that, as you'll have very few classes in a secondary setting that may be a bit more challenging. So the stream area is very much like social media. This is where we can post topics or questions. We can just share updates with our classes, and we can also send updates to specific students as well. I'll show the specific student part later. I'm going to jump to the People tab, and this is where we can invite our students, and we can also invite co-teachers. So it may be that in this time of, a very different way of teaching and learning post-summer, you may want to share your class with other teachers who are teaching either the same subject or the same age group. Now that could be other teachers within your local authority, doesn't have to be within your same school. So you may want to have a test classroom set up where you're sharing resources with other teachers, and that will help reduce your workload significantly if you're all sharing your numeracy resources or your higher or Nat 5 resources as well. So you can have a classroom set up for that. Other things that I always recommend is, if you're unfamiliar with Google Classroom, you can add other teachers as students so that they can tell you what they see as the teacher, as a student in the student view, just to help you make sure that you're getting things right. You can have test classrooms set up. That's a great thing to do as well. Certainly if you've got parents asking for support with what their child needs to do, having you in another classroom as a student will really support that. So I'm going to invite some students here. I'm just going to invite a few of these test students, and you'll see that I can invite multiple at once. I don't have to click individually and invite one at a time. I can invite in bulk. So I'm going to invite these 4 students. That's certainly the easiest way to do it when you don't have your students in front of you. And I used to teach primary 2, primary 3, and it was much easier for me to invite those children into the classroom than for them to accurately put in that class code. Saves any issues with any errors. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to jump out of this classroom, and I'm going to go into my demo class that I've already created. So I'm going to click on this hamburger menu. That's the 3 lines at the top left, and I can see my classrooms here. I can always go back to the class home screen as well, just to see them in this order. Another useful tip about this home screen is we can click and drag these to reorder. So I tend to have, this is my test account, but you can have it so that if you're a student in some classrooms as a teacher, you could have them in a different area of this home screen and have your own classes all together, just so it's easier for you to navigate. I'm going to open this demo class just so you can see what it looks like when it's a bit more populated. So what you'll see here is I had a post put up at 8 o'clock this morning on the classroom stream. So I've done a little bit of an explanation. I've included a video for my learners. Now that's great when it comes to asynchronous learning. So asynchronous is when it's not live, the students aren't accessing it all at the same time, but you want them to have the same access to instructions. So using videos, whether you're an authority that uses Castify or Loom, or you can also create screen recordings in other tools, or even use your phone to create a wee video to then post into the classroom. The Classroom app for Android or iOS is fantastic, as it allows you to post to the stream directly from the camera on your tablet or mobile phone. So that's a useful tip to note, just that the Classroom app has got a few other features that we don't get on the Google Chrome version. So I can quickly do an update for my class. So I'll do a quick hello. Now, if you were wanting to remind some specific students of a task, or if you are at the point where when we return to school in August, that your class are going to be split, you may want to have classrooms for each of these classes so we can post to multiple classes at the same time. We can do the same announcement. So if you were going to be sharing the same updates with a few classrooms, you can do that easily here. Or if you were to post this to specific students, I can click on this all students drop-down menu, deselect all, and then I can choose the specific students I wish to send this update to. It may be that you have some students who are unable to return to school due to health or other circumstances. So it may be that you're providing some other instructions to them, but you want them to be part of the whole class as well. You can post this straight away, or you can also schedule. I'm going to talk a bit more about scheduling in the classwork section. Another thing in the People tab, just before I go into the classwork, is down the side here. If you are an authority who do have access to Gmail, we can email the students easily. At this point, we can mute the students or we can remove. I wouldn't really be removing students unless they have left your school and have maybe moved to another school in the same local authority where they'll be keeping that username active. So just make sure that you're able to remove them at that point. We can also organise in A to Z and easily invite others at this point. I'm going to now go into the classwork section and just talk through setting this up as well. So what you'll see here is I've got these with week beginning. Now, previously, I may have encouraged different subject titles, but as I've gone through and used Classroom more and more regularly over this interesting period of time that we've had in education, I've certainly found that using the week beginning titles is far easier for both you as a teacher to keep on top of and manage, and also for students to access, because everything that you upload most recently will go to the top of the classwork section. So if I go and create a new topic, so that's what these are all individual topics, I will do for next week, so week beginning and 22nd of June, and I will add that. So you'll see that will go to the top of that classwork section. Now, students don't see anything here until I have started to publish posts or assignments at this point. So I could have things scheduled ahead for next week to reduce my workload, and the students won't see it until it goes live. So that's a really useful time-saving tip, especially when we're going to have this hybrid blended learning style learning and teaching happening post-summer. And you can have everything scheduled so that when you are teaching live, those who are accessing from home will be able to access at the same time and also be able to access tasks when you want them to. So I'm going to go and create an assignment now. So I'm going to go to select assignment. And another useful tip here is to put in the class. So you may have S1Y, for example, and you may then have the class title. So it just means that when you're getting any updates or emails through about an assignment, or you see that someone's commented on something, you know what that task was. So I'm just going to do numeracy and give specific instructions at this point as well. And this is where we can then start to add some materials and some work into this. So we can either create from a brand new document. So I'm going to do that now. And I'm going to create a slide deck for the students. This will then load it straight away so that I can then start to edit without having to go and create a new slide and then upload it. I can do that all from this assignment menu. And title, for example, here. Then I can go into, if I just click and make sure that's got a name, close that. So this will then be in that assignment for the students. They can then have different edit access. So you may want it to be something that they simply read. So that would be a view file. You may want them to collaborate on a document. So that would be edit. Or for this task, I want them to have their own copy of this document. So I'm going to make a copy for each student. It's worth noting that if you have assigned something already, you cannot make a copy for each student. It needs to be done at this point, whether the assignment's in draft form, it's scheduled, but you cannot make a copy for each student if you have gone and assigned it and go back to edit it. I'm now going to add some files that I've got in my Google Drive. Now, this will make no sense because these are just going to be random files that I've got on hand here. So I'm going to select a couple. I can simply hold down Control to select quite a few at once. And then again, I can go and I can start to change, or I may want to remove things and change it about at this point too. Down the right-hand side, again, we can choose multiple classes to receive this task. So if you are, I think in secondary schools, this would probably be most beneficial, where you're teaching multiple S1 classes, S2, for example. You could choose the multiple classes that you want to have this task assigned to. You can set a due date. So I'm going to set this for next Friday. And you can also choose a topic. So I'm going to choose the topic of next week, so the date of next week. And then the rubric is where we can begin to create some assessment criteria. You may not want to use that. You may want to simply put in the success criteria into the instructions part of the assignment. But if you do want some specific assessment criteria, you can create a rubric, or if you have used them before, you can reuse one. So if I select from here, I can reuse one that I have used previously, and I can select that, or I can remove that and I can go and create a new rubric. So I'll just show you how to do that. Now, this is a great tool for the fact that it will automatically ask for scoring, but we can switch that off. So if you're not comfortable having points values associated with the task, switch off the scoring, and then we can go and create the rubric title. So I'm just going to do example, and this is where you may wish to use the benchmarks or the E's and O's to shape up what the rubric contains. So if you are doing an assessment piece at the end of a topic, you could then use that E and O or the benchmark from Curriculum for Excellence and simply kind of take that and break it down into your rubric so that you can easily map that to the E's and O's for any future planning as well. So I'm going to do description of the criteria, and then you can add quite a few things here. So I can do another blurb and do the same again. You can add multiple criteria for the same task. So you could then break it down. Certainly if you're doing cross-curricular work, you may want to have stuff from the different curricular areas too. I'll just hit save there. I've not done a title, words, and hit save. So that rubric is now saved. The students are also able to access that, so they can go and up-level their own work as well at this point. Now, the best thing to do if you're assigning to one class, you can schedule it. Right now I'm assigning this to multiple, so the schedule option isn't there. I can save it as a draft though. I am going to just switch it off for a few of the other classes just to show you how the scheduling works, because this is a great time saver for you as teachers for getting organized as well. You can schedule, so you can start scheduling for August. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. So I can hit schedule now. And I can either choose, so this is obviously for next week, so I can choose the date of Monday at 8 o'clock. But as I said, you could start scheduling for post-summer. So you could then start having things scheduled for the return to school after the summer holidays as well, if you just want to get things organized. So I'm going to schedule that for next Monday and hit schedule. That will save in a draft form as well. So now you'll see it here. I can go click on this, I can edit the assignment, and I can add more work and make copies for each student quite easily as it's scheduled. For any work that has been assigned, so if I find this writing task and I go and edit this, I'm unable to make a copy for each student. So at this point, if I add another file from my Google Drive, let's just add this one here, or maybe not one that's already attached. Let's find another random one, this one here. And then you'll see that I don't get that make a copy for each student option because this has been assigned. So by creating a scheduled assignment, you can go and edit it at different levels. Another useful tip is when it comes to just seeing what work has been assigned and what work you've got to mark. I am going to show you just some of the markings parts at just next. But in the hamburger menu, so in the 3 lines at the top left, you have a to-do list. So as a teacher of multiple classes, this is a really useful tool because this is all of the assignments that you have got set. You can filter this by classes. So I could go into my demo class, see what work has been returned there, or I can go into all classes and you'll see that there's quite a lot for me to go through and mark. If you've got things that you have marked previously from this past year, you can go and mark as reviewed to remove this from your to-do list. I'm going to talk a bit more about that just shortly. And just before I go into the marking of student work, you can create a copy of an entire class. So if you're at the point now, for certainly those of you in primary schools, you're not quite at the next school year yet, but those in secondary maybe have started, you can create a copy of an entire class. So in every classroom, we've got these 3 dots. They are quite difficult to see with the classroom banners. We can click on that and copy. And this will create a copy of the entire class and all of the assignments that are in there, the materials and all of the stuff from the classwork section. So this is a massive time saver. Certainly if you're delivering the same courses year on year, it means that you can go in, it will save everything as a draft, and you can edit them and adapt them for the next year without having to go and reattach and redo all of the work that you've done previously. So as that is copying, it does take a little minute. I don't have that much in this classroom. So for those of you with quite a significant amount of tasks, it may take a couple of minutes to make the copy. So what you'll see here is in the classwork section, we have all of these assignments in draft form. I can go and I can edit all the topics for next year's weeks, or I can have it so that they're just there in draft form ready for me to post and sort them at that point in time. So that's a useful tip for you. Certainly when it comes to changing classes in this transition time, you may wish to start adding in the class next teacher or other teachers from your faculty, so you can easily go and invite other teachers into this classroom as well. So next, I'm just going to talk through the assessment part of a Google Classroom. So what I'm going to do, I will go into classwork. I will open up a task that I'm hoping some students have done. So I'll maybe go into this one. No one's done this one, but it doesn't matter because I can still access and mark the work. So if I go into view assignment, I can see that it's been assigned to all of these students. They haven't handed it in, so none of them have actually turned in their assignments. I'm going to go into the attachments and I can see what work they have got here. So I've got their plan and I have got their Google Doc file as well. So I'm going to mark the Google Doc that I have assigned for them. So in Google Classroom, we have this ability to mark and comment. This is the kind of marking screen that we have. This isn't Google Docs, so this isn't a Google Doc screen that we've got in front of us here. Down the right-hand side, you'll see I've got my rubric. I can click on this to expand what each of the point values were. Again, the students have access to this, so they're able to actually see what I am expecting and what they need to do. I have the points values turned on for this rubric, so I can go in and I can just, obviously I'm making it up for the student, I can give them 2 points. I can add a private comment. So at this point, if a student hasn't turned in their work, I can remind them to submit your work. And I can post that, only the student will see that. They can also reply in the private comments in the Google Classroom. By giving it a grade, you'll see that with the points values, it's calculated what that was out of 10. And then this comment feature, so on the right-hand side, we've got this comment bank feature. Now, this is a huge time saver for you, as you can add to the bank quite easily. So if you wanted to add comments, another comment, and another one, that will add 3 different comments. So by doing new lines, so if you know that you're using the same kind of comments for each of your assignments, you can quite easily add multiple at once. You may have a bank of comments that you and your faculty have decided to use, or you and your stage partners have decided to use, just for consistency. And you could add that in quite easily, just copy and paste that, so long as each comment's on a new line. Add that in, then in your comment bank, you'll see those comments have appeared. So I can now go into this task, and where the comment appears at the side, I can click on here, and then as I start typing, I do the hashtag. You'll see it will start to predict what I am trying to say to the student, and I can use that hashtag feature and it will come up with those most recently used comments too. Students can then resolve or they can reply to them, so that you can have a bit of dialogue surrounding that piece of work as well. Once I've done all that marking, I can return that to the students for them to review and then hand in once they have actioned all of the kind of comments and feedback that I have provided them. So I can return that to them. I can check their originality as well. So one of the things when you create an assignment, I just show you this very quickly. When you create an assignment, you can, when you add a Google Docs file, you can do originality reports. Now that's a plagiarism checker, and we'll check basically Google for all of any work or any pieces of work that maybe the students haven't sourced. So it gives them the option to go in and just double check that they're using original material or that they are referencing. So when it comes to upper secondary, this is probably a really useful tool for students to use. And I can switch on the originality reports at this point as well. So I'm just going to do this. If I reuse a rubric really quickly, let's use this one. And then hopefully, I think I've used up all my originality reports in this one. So I've used 3 originality reports in this classroom. So that's me reached my limit. But you would be able to select that, tick that, and then when students are using it, they can check originality, and that will flag any sources that maybe they haven't cited at this point. I will just go into a piece of work where that has been switched on. So if I go into view this assignment, and I select this one here, and I can see that there are no flagged passages in this piece of work. So it will tell me if it has flagged any, and it will also tell me the website that has been flagged as well. I come along to another piece of work as well. I can check originality if the student hasn't run it as well. So that's really the main pieces of assessment for the students, is that comment bank feature where we can add to our comment bank. You'll see that that's available for me in a different task. So it's not just for that one assignment. And we can also make sure that we're providing comments specific to students. The last thing I'm going to show you is just very quickly, because I'm aware of the time, I'm just going to show you how you would add a video to a task, to an assignment in Google Classroom for that asynchronous learning. So what I have access to is Screencastify, but some of you may use Loom depending on your local authority. Now, Screencastify doesn't work very well with streaming on YouTube, so I've pre-recorded a video and that has been saved into my Google Drive. So when I create an assignment, I can go into Add and select Google Drive. Now, Screencastify will create a Google Drive folder, which we can see here. And I have created a video of coin multiplication for big maths. And I must say I was quite impressed that I remembered this method from 5 years ago. It's the last time I taught it. So I'm going to add this in to my classroom so students can view the file. I will give the task a name and give specific instructions. And this is really useful because I know that some students are struggling to access work on Google Classroom. So by providing a video demonstrating how to go through a different method means that the students are actually hearing from you. So even if they're not in the classroom, they can access this prior to coming in to the classroom for learning and teaching, or when they're learning from home. I will then attach the different documents that are required for this task and make a copy for the student. And then I can assign this to a specific topic. I can differentiate. So at this point, I can choose just specific learners I wish to have this. And then I can assign or I can schedule. So I'm just going to click assign at this point so it goes live. And what you'll see, I'll just open up the video just so you can see what this looks like. And I will go into here, open up the video. And at this point, what the students see, once this loads, is this is a screen recording. So Screencastify or Loom allow you to record your screen. I can go through the method. I'll skip through ahead so that you can see that everything is loaded. I can talk through it. I could put in my webcam as well so that they can see me as talking through this. And it just helps them to access the learning a lot easier without having to read all of those instructions, because from an accessibility point of view, it's really important that the instructions meet all of your learners' needs. I think that's all from me. if there are any questions, pop them in onto YouTube. And I know we've got a question and answer session coming up at the end.
Thanks so much, Ailey. That was really, really great to see the full process of how you might set work and get work and give feedback to students in Google Classroom. And the reason that we wanted to show you that in so much detail was because right now, I think the feedback that we get from a lot of people is that whilst you know how to use Google Classroom, and I think we all agree, most people on the call probably are using these tools day to day, it's actually about the process of supporting learners by setting that work, giving them feedback and returning that work. And I found when I was teaching, what was really useful is to actually get into that process. So you set the work and set a deadline. You give yourself however long your kind of marking policy is to get that marked and returned to the student. But by actually just like clicking the return button and getting students to submit the work can really start to help that process, and also helps you get in a sort of good workflow and gets the students in a good workflow of what they expect from you. And we had some great comments coming in from the side about how you might do this while you have, half your group in and half your group out. So different ways you might want to do this is either have 2 separate classrooms. Personally, I think that's a bit messy. I don't think that's the way I would necessarily do it. But other ways you might want, but that might work for you, right? And so I'm not telling you what you should do, but these are ideas. A second way might be to select the students that are in and call them group 1 or however you want to do it, and assign a piece of work with a deadline to them for a certain date. And then for your group 2, select those students and have a different date and the assignment attached, so that it's kind of consistent, but maybe they have different deadlines because your expectations are different. I also think pre-recording content. So if, like Ailey just showed there, if you know that in class you've got some activity where you need to describe a complicated theory, for example, and you've done a really great video about that, you could do that right without the students being there. You could deliver that on the same day at the same time by having that video there available. So whilst students might not be there, it's about giving them access to what's happening so that they're not feeling like they're missing out, and really using that time when they're in class, not just to drill them with information, because I'm not sure how great, at the end of the day, students are having a difficult time right now as well. They might not be as focused when they come to class because everything is so unusual for them as well. So maybe, trying to do sort of bite-sized stuff so that when they're in class, you actually get that one-to-one supportive time with them. And actually a lot of that pre-learning is done before they actually come to class. So there are some hopefully you picked up some practical ideas about how you might use processes and how you might use Google Classroom to support that. I'm just sharing ideas that have worked for me in the past, and not everything will work great for everyone. And obviously we will be hearing from Ian shortly about how they're planning to do it, and they're planning to do it at his school. But I just wanted to make sure that we had time to go through some of the questions that were coming in. And I know Ian was doing a great job at answering some of them. So there are a couple of things, a couple of questions. I'm just going to start flicking through them. So someone said, when creating an assignment for a class and attach a file where the pupil gets a copy, is it possible to attach that same copy of the file to a future assignment so that they can continue to work on it? That's a really good question. What Ailey was showing you was the process of setting work, marking it, and returning it. And by doing it that way, you're not having to reset an assignment every time to get someone to rework that piece of work. And if I just think about my experience in the classroom, so I used to teach in FE and it was BTEC work, and a lot of the work would mean that once I marked it, the students would have to continue working on it afterwards. So what I used to do was set up the assignment once, mark it, return it to the students so that they could continue working on it. And you can do one of two things. I actually used to get the students to do additional work in a different colour, just like maybe some of you do anyway, so you can see what additional work they've done. And I'd also use the version history to check to see what they've added on since the time that I sent it back to them. So that might be a way for you to manage that without actually less work for you, because you're not having to reset that assignment every time. If not, you could go through and attach each student's work to another assignment, but it feels really clunky, and actually you could do that by sending that work back. And actually what Google Classroom does really nicely is it shows you a log of when those students have submitted. So once you've returned the work, if they resubmit it, it'll show you that they've handed it in again. So it then repeats that process. And in theory, you could do that forever, right? So you can just keep that up and going. So I definitely recommend doing it that way, because it's probably easier for you and for the students to keep on top of it, and you can go in and still mark it and add additional private comments. Okay, and then someone's asked a question: why does Google Classroom not import marks from Google Forms anymore? As far as I'm aware, it does.
I think there is an option when you use a quiz to import grading. So it may be that you just need to toggle on that switch when you are using a Google Forms quiz. It's underneath all of the options when you assign a form, and it's just to make sure that you're assigning it from your Google Drive. I know that's a tip that's been shared with me from other teachers, is to make sure if you have created it in Forms and then you're attaching it, you're attaching it from your Google Drive rather than the link, and I think it does the grade importing a bit easier in that way. Or you can always create a quiz directly from a Google Classroom as well.
Awesome. Someone asked a question. I thought you only got 3 originality reports per year, and that's only if you use the same classroom for the whole year. So the way that, again, I would do it is maybe break your classrooms down into modules, so you could have more originality reports. So the way that it works is that you, the free with G Suite for Education, you get 3 originality reports per classroom. So basically, you can run it on 3 different assignments, which probably is enough per unit, but might not quite be enough if you're doing that for a whole year's worth of work, particularly for secondary. Can you add comments to things that aren't just a Google Doc, like a photo or more visual subjects? Ailey, I'll leave that one to you.
Yes, you can. So you can add comments to Google Slides, photos, any of the things. Just when you open it in Google Drive, there's an option to add comments as well. Certainly I can start sharing my screen if you want to pop that on again. I'll just go into slides just to show you, which is quite useful. Certainly if either students are working on something together, or if you are working with just providing feedback, you can add comments. So there's the add comment option, just if you're going in and accessing a file, and you can add a comment in. So add a comment, and if that comment has been marked as resolved, so if I resolve that, at the top right, there's the comment history. So this will show you the previous dialogue that has existed on this document. So you'll see that the comment's there, it's been marked as resolved, and then you can add a new comment to reopen that discussion. So that option at the top there is really useful to use when you are using the comment feature.
Thanks, Ailey. We've got some really great questions, so I'm just going to keep going. And if we run a little bit over, I think that's fine, right? Because this is really valuable information. So a couple of other things that I just wanted to call out. So someone said, can we, I'd love to be able to set up groups within the same class for regular groupings. I always seem to forget to tick or untick one kid. This is honestly one of the biggest pieces of feedback that our classroom team gets. And as Ian said, get you and all of your students and every single person you know to give that feedback to the give feedback button, because basically the things that the features that are requested the most are the ones that get the attention of the you know, they're the ones that get worked on. And actually the classroom team do read every piece of feedback, and I know we say this all the time, but they've actually been pioneers for the rest of Google developers in really listening to the customer voice. So please do use that button. We feed this back as well, as the Google for Education team to the product teams. But it is something that the team are aware of, and is something that we've talked about. But I think there's probably a little bit more complexity to add in groups, because in theory, your Google Classroom students are already a group. So then to make it into another group, it's just a bit more kind of technically challenging. So it is something that the classroom team are aware of, and right now we are focused on trying to get the features out there that are really being used, and I do appreciate that. Without, you know, it saves you having to have 2 classes. Okay, there is a couple more things. Someone just made the point, garden email summaries are really helpful because parents are getting that information about the students. So like work handed in and work that's been missed. And if you start to do that process of, you know, getting students to submit the work and you returning the work, that makes that classroom, those guardian emails, a lot more valuable, because they can actually see what's been handed in and what hasn't been handed in. And also you can always see the work, right, even if a student hasn't handed it in. So what I used to do is if a student doesn't hand it in, I still give them feedback, but I always return that work to them. So just for my mentality and my OCD, I can see that I've actually returned work and that I haven't got anything to mark. Okay, another question. Is there a way for pupils in primary to get notifications with new assignments / announcements that are posted? They don't have emails, or do they just have to keep going to check? Unfortunately, if they don't have access to their emails, yes, they do have to go and check. The Guardian summaries might be helpful in this use case because parents would get an update to see what's been posted and what hasn't. And I think it's more about just getting the best practice of them going on, like the first thing they do every day is they go onto Google Classroom and check to see what work has been posted. And it will come up on Google Classroom for them, obviously. Okay, there's a few more coming in, so I'm going to keep going. Are you able to see who has accessed Google Classroom each day? I find it really useful to know which of my pupils are accessing their work and when. That's a really good question. That is something that was we looked at in a previous webinar last Friday. So you can head over to the GFE webinars link that we shared earlier, and we did a reporting in Glow and what access you can see. Right now, with Google Classroom kind of as a thing, there isn't a notification to say which students have accessed the work. The way that I used to manage it as a teacher is I'd go into the students where I knew they probably aren't as engaged, and I'd see if they've even opened the assignment, because you can check by their revision history. And actually, when you set a piece of work and you make a copy for each student, it won't show for you until the students actually opened it and clicked it. So that might be a way to go and manage that. But right now, built into Google Classroom as a standalone product, there's not a way for you to be able to do that, although I do know there are third-party tools that allow you to do it as well. So something maybe to go and have a chat about with either your Glow Key contact, or just going to have a bit of a play around with what is out there. Okay, just a few more things. Okay, really good question here about Google Forms, and I am going to just jump on this one. Are improvements being made to Google Forms quizzes so that it doesn't show free text answers in red wrong when they're correct? You as a teacher have the ability to put in incorrect answers as right answers. So when you do a short answer question, the thing that we see teachers do, and it works really well, is you put in, say, common spelling mistakes, or you put in capitalized versions of the answer and non-capitalized versions of the answer. Ailey, is there any kind of like top tips that you give to people when you're doing training?
I think it's just making sure that you're reviewing it, so you're not just going off of what the computer is saying is right or wrong from what you set as the criteria. It's, going in, adding a comment to it as a private comment in your classroom, or just going and reviewing the work that the students have submitted, rather than just thinking it's a self-marking quiz, it's done it for me, because it won't always be as accurate at that point. Just making sure that you go in, you view what the students have submitted, and you use your teacher judgment as well to mark as correct, and can give that as a private comment in classroom.
Awesome, thank you. I've got another question here from Holly. So is there any way for the overall score to include missing work as 0%? I have pupils who have submitted only one item with 90%, whereas others who have submitted everything seem worse. Not 100% sure I understand the full question, but you can give 0 to a mark. So the way that, again, I would manage it is that I actually didn't do percentage in scoring. I used to use a different system. So I would give a 0 if they haven't submitted it, a 1 if they had submitted it but it needed reworking, and a 2 if they didn't need to do anything else and it was great. And then I would give them private comments about what needed to be done, and obviously comment on their work. With rubrics, it's a little bit different because you're marking against a rubric you've already set. So in theory, you could just go and give them 0 and you wouldn't need to mark against the rubric. Ailey, do you think I've understood that question? I'm
not sure if it's just the way it's calculating in the marks part of classroom that's averaging, but not counting the 0. So it may be if you try giving it 1% to see what that does, if that does change the average score that the students have got. It's not something that I've used extensively to know if that works or not. Worth trying.
Thanks. Thank you. Someone's just said, can we quickly demo how to check if they've opened the assignment? Ailey, I think just for the sake of time, I don't think we'll demo, but if you want to just explain like what that would look like from the screen perspective, and then also check in the revision history.
Yeah, so in any document that is a Google Doc, you can go into the tools option and activity dashboard, and that's where you can see who has accessed the document and when. So if you've shared it with a student, you'll be able to see if they have accessed it recently or have never accessed it. And that's really the most useful thing. And then in the file, you have the version history, and you can see any edits at that point and see when they happened.
Awesome. Okay, thanks so much. I really want to leave time for Ian because he's got some really great examples about how they're planning, and I think it's really valuable. So we'll bring it in. Hi, Ian. I'm sorry we've eaten your time. Ian, please feel free to go over time. I agree. If we need to do 15 minutes, that's fine. People can always watch this back. For those that are watching and do need to duck out at 12, you can just use this same link and just put the cursor back to wherever you want to start, or you can check out the past webinar. We'll pop it onto the past webinar section in our GFE webinar. So Ian, I'm going to pass it over to you, and hopefully you're okay to stay a little bit later because I didn't check. But yeah, if you want to yourself.
If children appear, but we'll crack on and see how we go. So thanks very much, everyone. Really interesting session there from Ailey about looking at the tools that are available in G Suite to support blended learning at home, and I'm or blended learning to include learning that's happening at home as well. And I'm really hopeful that I can share some of the plans that we have coming together for Larkhall Academy for when children return in August. So just a very brief kind of look at the type of school that we are. Well, we've got over 1,100 children, which includes a specialist additional support needs unit serving the town of Larkhall as well as the villages of Stonehouse, Ashgill and Netherburn. So, there's a sizable town there as well as a more rural community as well. And 50% of those pupils are living in areas of high deprivation, so in deciles 1 to 3. And I think, that presents us with some challenges in terms of equity, and it also presents us with some challenges in terms of their access to technology and the internet as well. And I'll speak a little bit about that. And at the moment, we're not a one-to-one school with about 300 Chromebooks in the digital estate, and I mean that's continuing to grow. But I think there's a lot of demand for devices right now, so we'll have to see how quickly we can get them in the building. Okay, so we very much see our blended learning model as having three very distinct strands, and I'll give you a little overview about each of those three strands. So we need to focus initially on the in-class learning. So when we're looking at in-class learning, we want to make sure that the interactions there are really high quality, and we need to make sure that those interactions are helping to prepare and support learners for when they're accessing the other two strands. So we've got a synchronous learning online strand there as well. So that will be the delivery of live lessons, and we'll be using Google Meet for our live lesson, and I'll speak to how we're going to hopefully manage that. And something that we've been doing since June has been looking at the asynchronous video lessons that we've made available through Google Classroom, and also putting videos on YouTube as well for children to access at times that suit them. So each of those three areas is going to be absolutely critical. And, as a school, we face real challenges in terms of timetabling staff to be able to deliver lessons in a classroom with learners, but also, how are we then going to staff our synchronous and then the planning and the preparation time that's needed for the asynchronous learning as well. So, that's a big logistical challenge. But all of it has to be done, and it is going to be underpinned by our school values of kindness, togetherness, and resilience. And, kindness is something that we've seen and heard quite a bit about, recently. And it's something that, we're going to need to make sure that children don't feel like they're behind. No child is behind because of this situation. No child is going to need to catch up. What we're going to do is need to make sure that we've got the right supports in place to be able to help them be ready for, their learning across the year. And for, secondary schools, the end of that year is of course some kind of national qualification examination. And, we still don't really know what that's going to look like yet. So, there's lots of uncertainty there, but, being the consistent adult who is trying to maintain the learning and teaching is so very, very important. So let's start off then by just giving you an overview of what the in-class learning will look like for us. Well, it's either going to be driven in one of two ways. So we're either going to be introducing the new content and the skills and the knowledge in the class, and then we'll be setting tasks which are asynchronous and with kind of live lessons to support that for children when they're at home, or we're going to be providing new resources through videos and potentially live lessons in kind of that flipped classroom model by giving all the content up front, and hopefully they will have studied that before they arrive in class, and then when a young person arrives in class, we will be using the application of that knowledge and skills. So it doesn't matter which way round you're doing it. It needs to be what's right for your sector. It needs to be what's right for your subject specialism. So that just requires a bit of thought and a bit of planning by the subject or the sector specialists. We aren't dictating how you do that for your subject area. So there's a lot of flexibility there. It's about identifying what's right for your subject area and then delivering. And the focus when children are in class, it has to be about high quality learning and teaching. So lots of teacher learner engagement, modeling, questioning, making sure we've got really clear understandings from the children about what they're doing and then what they're going to need to go away and work on. So none of that I think is going to be new or different for many teachers, but it will be about focusing on really focusing in on making absolute best use of the time that we have with the learners. So that moves us to our kind of second strand of supporting the learning that's going on through the use of synchronous learning. So we're going to be in South Lanarkshire making use of Google Meet, and Google Meet with learners can be accessed in one of two ways. That can be through either the link that is formed in Classroom that Ailey demonstrated, and we've also provided some training in terms of how you use nickname meets as well. So we've got this meeting space that when a teacher's in, a learner can be in, but if there's no teacher, the learners can't access. So it sits as a really secure video conferencing environment, which is why it really appealed. Colleagues across the schools in South Lanarkshire have already got experience in using Meets, and the screenshot here is of a Teach Meet that we did with over 70 teachers in our school to kind of share resources and ideas for online learning. But when we get children into the kind of virtual classroom, it's going to be really interesting to see how they interact and how they behave and what their thoughts are on it. And we're going to absolutely be led by learner feedback on that. And I think one of the things that supported us really nicely in terms of getting Meet switched on has of course been the digital team at the local authority at South Lanarkshire, especially Karen McLeod, who's worked really hard on developing guidance for schools. So schools have a framework to work to, but they're not absolutely set in stone. So we have the ability to be able to look at kind of local policy and go, actually, we're not going to have any one-to-one meetings with learners, or we're only going to have Google Meets being recorded, but we're not sharing that recording. So all of those types of considerations need to be wrestled with. But once you've made the decision, you've kind of shared that with staff, then hopefully it's going to open up a really exciting avenue for working with young people. So I kind of see a number of ways that we're going to use it. We're going to have teachers who are either working in school or at home, and they're going to provide live lessons on Google Meet. We might also have teachers who are teaching lessons with children in the classroom, but there will be some children who can't get in the building, or we'll be using Google Meet to be able to stream the lessons to those children at home who can't get in, even though there are some children in class. There's also potential that if we've got subject specialists who, because of social distancing rules, can't get all the children they want, all the bodies in the same classroom, we might have the children split across two classrooms with a lesson being streamed from one classroom to another. And I think for practical subjects where you're maybe limited to the number of computers that you have in a classroom, for example, then that might work quite nicely with a second member of staff who isn't a subject specialist sat kind of next door supervising the children, but with the content coming from a specialist. And then, as I said, really good to be able to check in one-to-one with young people as well. So do we get a second member of staff on the Meet, or do you work in a room with someone else? So you're not working in a virtual room with a young person, and you just give thoughts to how those tools could be used. So excited to have kind of 4 different ways that we'll be embedding Google Meet to be able to provide our synchronous learning online. So I'll turn to our asynchronous learning then. So this is the learning that young people can pick up at times that work for them, probably at home with their families or potentially in study spaces. So we've got lots of, we've got a dedicated space on our website for supporting families with their home learning. But in terms of what the children will be accessing, it all centers around the use of Google Classrooms and Google Sites. And both of those resources using video-based content, and all of that is being filmed using Screencastify, which is what we're using in South Lanarkshire to be able to allow videos to be made. So I think it's so important that teachers are trying to make their own videos. I think initially when you start to make a video and you're doing some teaching, you can kind of feel a little bit nervous and a little bit apprehensive about it. Well, that's normal, and you'll probably take 4 or 5 takes, absolutely. But the more you do it, the better you get at it. And even if you don't think it's very good, we're always so critical of ourselves. I can guarantee you that the young people who know you and are working with you will appreciate that video, because they'll be getting the information from that familiar face and that familiar contact, and that is so important. And then in terms of the kind of commenting, I know Ailey spoke a bit about how we do this, practically using the tools in G Suite. The real focus for us is going to be on giving good feedback to children so they know what their next steps are going to be in learning. And I always think with feedback, when it's written, it sometimes takes a little bit longer to do. So, absolutely make use of the dictation tools, which are baked into the Chromebook. It's one of the accessibility settings. So you could record your voice and give voice feedback instead of, writing things. And sometimes to hear a voice is much nicer than to kind of read bits of text as well, and potentially more accessible as well. So, I highly recommend that. So, we're trying to take the good pedagogical skills that we would have in the classroom and apply them across all 3 of our strands to be able to support learners. So, as a school community and, looking at South Lanarkshire, slightly wider context, what are the next steps? Well, we have to continue to support everybody in this recovery phase. So, a focus on kindness is going to be absolutely essential, but also just being aware that people haven't had a normal routine. They haven't potentially been able to access all the learning that they would. People are going to feel a bit out of sorts when we return into the building because of physical distancing. There's going to be a whole kind of culture shift there, and it's all going to feel very, very different. So we're going to be really mindful of that kind of health and well-being side first and foremost. And then once we've done that, we're going to be asking teachers and colleagues across the school to be using blended learning approaches that they haven't used before. We'll be asking them to try using pieces of technology like Google Meet with learners, or to be increasing the amount of feedback they're giving through Google Docs or rubrics and in Classroom. And there's going to need to be support in place for that. So if people aren't sure about what they're doing, they're going to need to feel confident and comfortable to be able to go and access that support and get further help if they need it. And of course, within all of this, I gave a little bit of context at the start about the type of area that the school serves. Of course, we're going to need to keep equity in mind to make sure that if people don't have access to devices or don't have access to the internet connection, then that is something that we can provide. And I've seen across Scotland really interesting ways of kind of getting dongles or Wi-Fi or internet connections to people's houses. So I'm looking forward to seeing what happens in that area there, because I know South Lanarkshire Council have been working on a number of solutions to be able to roll that out. And I think the onus is on all specialists and teachers to identify what is working in their context, and then trying to share that with others, because as a nation, but wider than that, looking globally, there are lots of teachers who are all in the same position here. So being able to reach out on Twitter or other social media to kind of find ideas and to share what's working for you is absolutely really, really important. So I've tried to kind of keep that kind of brief and short, but drop me an email or get me on Twitter at Mr. Voss if you kind of got any questions, or you've got ideas that you want to share, because really enjoy amplifying other people's work and really enjoy connecting with people to kind of share what we're doing and grow. So hopefully that wasn't too long, and it will give you some ideas on what you could possibly do for your blending learning models. Hi, Kieran.
Hi, thanks so much, Ian. I really love that sentiment about the support network. And I think, and I know Ailey's pointed this out, but GEG Scotland is a really good community. It's a Google Educator group for those that aren't sure what GEG means. But essentially, it's a community for you guys to ask these types of questions. Currently, you can do that on Twitter. If you're not on Twitter, then Ailey is running some events. I'll bring Ailey back in, actually. That makes sense, as Ailey leads our GEG Scotland group. But Ailey, do you want to just talk about some of the activities that you're running for Scottish educators?
Yeah, so Ian is now part of the leadership group. We're kind of revamping what we're doing at the moment. So we're planning just the next few months of GEG Scotland. And the first thing that I think is really priority is upskilling staff over the summer period, certainly newly qualified teachers or those moving to authorities who are using G Suite and you've maybe never used it before. So we're going to start targeting that. But going by some of the questions coming through, I think we'll do some stuff on recording your screen and also just making use of video a bit more and some focus on that initially. So over the summer, there will be some webinars. They'll all be recorded. They'll likely be hosted on Google Meet, just so that you can access it quite comfortably. And it's a nice, cozier environment for asking your questions as well. So watch out on Twitter, and there is gegscotland.com. I'm going to be revamping that website very shortly to include some more content to help you all with your new learning and teaching that you're delivering.
Thanks, Ailey. And I just wanted to say we had some really great questions coming in. And I'll be honest, even though I work for Google, I don't have all the answers. And a lot of my day is spent going to look at the support center, because actually a lot of the answers to the questions that you'll be able to find is there. And it's a really underutilized resource. And I don't think many people use it that well, or use it at all, or even know that it exists. But basically, if you go to support.google.com, you can essentially search for anything. And most of the information, particularly on like the how do I do this and how does this feature work and what's included in this tool, you can definitely find it there. And that's more about kind of just like feature by feature, how the tools, what is involved in the tools. But particularly for teaching and learning, definitely heading over to the Teacher Centre. It has some really good kind of step-by-step guides on how to use these tools for teaching and learning. And that's if you can't make any of the live stuff that's happening right now, because there's so much stuff happening online that you can drop into. If you're not on Twitter or you're not on social media and you're not accessing some of this kind of live content, I definitely recommend signing up to the Google for Education newsletter that gets sent out quite frequently, and it has all of the updated stuff plus any events that we have coming up. So please go and check that out. And I think, well, as people are moving to more virtual and getting more comfortable with being virtual, we'll start to utilize kind of virtual events that folks can jump in and out of as they can. So yeah, there's definitely lots and lots of resources out there, and sometimes it can be a bit overwhelming, but there's plenty of support in Scotland. And I think, by the fact that we have a great community of educators already using the tools that are willing to support. So thanks to you guys for doing that. Just a couple of things that I just wanted to just touch on. Before I do that, just wanted to say a big shout out to South Lanarkshire Council, because this is really the reason that this webinar was held today. Karen and I were talking last week about how do we support educators in that local authority to do this, and Karen kindly suggested that we open this up to everyone, not just teachers in South Lanarkshire. So I just wanted to shout out all the great work that you've done there, Ian, but also Karen, who I know has been watching today, because we probably wouldn't have done this if I wouldn't have had that conversation with her. So this is definitely a credit to you guys. And just a couple of questions we had in. So someone said, can we have some training on Screencastify? That might be something that GEG Scotland want to kind of tackle. But I did find, I just typed in Screencastify training, and there's some good videos on there. And to be honest, it is quite straightforward. If you download it and download the extension itself, you'll see when you go through, it does talk you through how to do that, and just a bit of testing will probably get you a bit more confident with the tools as well.
There's a couple of badges available that people can get, so you can become a Screencastify Master and a Screencastify Genius. So those courses are all online, take 45 minutes to an hour, and yeah, well worth doing.
Awesome. Ian, I knew you would have done it.
Yeah. I've got it down here. I can just. Yeah.
One other thing I just wanted to just say as well, and particularly based on some of the other questions we had coming in, whilst these tools are available and it can do all of these great things, your processes and your security and your safety processes always trump what the tools can do. And I think we're not necessarily equipped completely for a completely online learning experience. So things like, having the practice in place that you record every lesson that you have with students, for example, is something that we've seen now built into these procedures and processes, but they probably haven't come quickly enough because we haven't been in this situation before. So if you are worried about doing certain things, I know we had a question about how might we stream a practical lesson like home economics, for example. You probably don't want primary school children over the hob, right? Like cooking when you're not there to supervise. But there might be ways that you can engage parents in that. And actually that's definitely down to a practice and processes and getting, parents and guardians involved in that teaching and learning process. And it might be that you actually just record something that students can then watch and then participate in and take photos of later on and show what they've done with parents or grandparents or whoever they're in the care of at that time. And there's some really interesting ways that we've seen schools do this. And there's lots and lots of stuff. Again, on Twitter, we're seeing schools post regularly. And next week, we'll be showing some other ideas about how this is being done in a practical sense. But it really is down to your processes, and it's definitely worth speaking with who maybe your head teacher or your safeguarding officer or whoever is responsible for that in your local authority to make sure that you're adhering to those policies as well.
I think that's a really good point, Kiri, because teachers, you guys know the pupils who you work with best. So be led by what's going to work for your learners, because not everything is going to work in every situation. So it's about cherry picking the items that are going to work for you. And then, trying to blend it together to give them as close as possible to the type of learning experience that they might have got if they had you all the time in a classroom. And actually, doing work at home for some children will provide them opportunities that they wouldn't be able to do in the classroom, because it might give them more time, more space. It might give them, a kind of a happier space for them to be able to reflect and feel comfortable to try something that they probably wouldn't have wanted to do in front of their peers. And I think being able to assign certain things to certain children on Google Classroom, just makes differentiation so easy. People will all be working on different things in different places. So, I think primary school is absolutely amazing at differentiation. Sometimes at secondary schools, we aren't quite as hot on it. So, a real opportunity there. So, look for the opportunities as well as the challenges.
Yeah. And I'll just sort of reiterate Ian's point before we close off, but there is so many things you can do, and it's really about using these tools in the way that it helps you and getting the most out of it and what's right for you and your learners. And I think today's webinar was hopefully more food for thought rather than, okay, I need to go back and watch Ailey's demo and do exactly what she's told me to do. So hopefully it was helpful in terms of, thinking about how you might use some of these tools to make up your processes, and please just try it out. There is so much training, there's so much advice and guidance, but until you actually start clicking buttons and figure out how this is going to work best for you, you're not going to have the right answers. This is, it's really individual, and it's about how you support your learners and how they respond to you and how they respond to your teaching style. And that's the same whether it's in person or online. And I just think, don't be scared of the tools. You can't break it. So just click buttons, click things, and just see what's there. Click in the settings and see what settings you can change. And if you want to set up a kind of demo environment in a classroom, set up a classroom that's just your test classroom, where maybe you invite a colleague in and just you can test out how some of these features work, so you can see it from both the student and the teacher side. With that, I'm going to wrap up because we are 18 minutes over, and I know that people watching this back will be thinking, gosh, this is a lot longer than an hour, which they first said. So with that, I just want to thank everyone for coming. I want to thank South Lanarkshire for really kind of inspiring us to put on the webinar today. Thank you to Ian, who is just a constant champion of Google in all aspects of his life. And if you follow him on Twitter, you'll see all the great tweets that he does. And I'm so happy to see that he's part of GEG Scotland now. Thank you to Ailey for amazing training, because as always, you are so so great, and we love having you presenting at these types of events. And we'll hopefully get to see you all in person soon at some point, even if it's next year. But please stay tuned into our webinar series, because we'll be doing lots more of these moving forward. Thank you all, and have a great rest of the week. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.